Our next guest is Meinl cymbals artist Navene Koperweis. Navene plays for the progressive metal band InTheis. At its core, the group consists of Navene and his fiancée Cheney Crabb. They bring touring guitarists and bassists into the fold whenever they hit the road, but when they're off the road, it's Navene and Cheney writing and recording the music. Navene is a multi-instrumentalist and producer, and these skills have helped make InTheis extremely self-sufficient. Based in Northern California, Navene strikes me as one of those people that just has no worries. I mean, he's a super cool guy, laid back and always very polite. Navene came on board to Meinl many years ago, right at the tail end of his time with a band called Animosity. He soon after joined a then unknown band called Animals as leaders. After some time with Animals, Navene left that band to set out on a path of electronica. He hit the road as Navene K, opening shows for bands like Animals and doing it all as a one-man operation. That's another thing I've always admired about Navene. His drive and willingness to roll up his sleeves and handle it all himself. The guy is just a go-getter. After some time, Navene put together InTheis. In addition, he tracks drums for various bands and projects, with one of note being the latest album, From Whitechapel. I caught up with Navene recently and we chatted about this and that. His straightforward and no-nonsense approach to everything made for a pretty honest interview. On to the podcast. So I'd like to welcome everybody into the Meinl Radio podcast. Today I have longtime Meinl cymbal artist, total badass, and extreme cool guy, Navene Koperweis with us. What is up, Navene?
Yo, Chris, how's it going? I'm proud to have that extreme cool guy badge.
Dude, you've always been like the total extreme cool guy. I actually have a question about that later on.
Okay.
Dude, we're going to launch right into it. So the first time I heard of you was when I was sitting in an airport in Amsterdam on my way back to the U.S. from Germany, and fellow Meinl cymbals artist, actually, he was not your fellow Meinl cymbals artist at that time because you were not a Meinl cymbals artist at that time, right. But he was, and his name is John Rice. Everybody knows him as Charn. He emailed me to tell me how you needed to be on my radar. So at that time, you were still with a group called Animosity. Now, I still see... Like to this day, I still see people comment online about that band, and they have a lot of fondness when they talk about the band. So was Animosity your first professional experience, and what was it about that band that makes people still bring it up after so many years?
So it was, pretty much my first pro band, if you will. I was in, this is lesser known, I was in this hardcore band called Hoods that was actually signed to Victory Records.
What was the band called?
Hoods, Hoods. So that's a more old school hardcore band, and they're big within the hardcore community. But when I was in Animosity, they needed a drummer to go on the road, and everybody in Animosity was in high school, and I did like the equivalent of, I did this homeschool program to get out of school early because I just hated school. And so I wanted to go on tour. So I went on tour with that band first. So that was really my first pro experience going on tour. But as soon as those guys got out of high school, we started touring a lot. And so then that became my main thing. But to answer your question, I think a lot of people just saw we were so young, like we were going on tour. We were all like 18 years old. Maybe, I think, I was the oldest. So I was like, 19 going on full U.S. tours. And I think just our vibe, like we had a lot of fun and energy. And I think a lot of other people found out about us around that age. So now there's a lot of nostalgia surrounding the band for those who were there at the time.
So, when you look back on previous musical endeavors as your career goes on, people tend to look back on earlier stuff, and some of it they might cringe a little bit, like, it sounded cool at the time, but now when I hear it, ugh. But when you go back and listen to the Animosity material, do you enjoy it? Does it make you cringe, or is it a mixture of both?
It's definitely a mixture of all that. There's good and bad. I mean, there's obviously things I would do a little bit differently now, but I think in essence, it's sort of what made me who I am now, for sure. It was just a bit more chaotic, like with my band InTheis. Now there's definitely some reference to Animosity that you could hear, but it's just a lot more controlled, I guess you could say. There's a little more attentiveness to the song structures being a little more simple, I guess.
So I don't think I've ever asked you this before. Like in all this time, I don't think I've ever asked you, what was like the flashpoint for you that made you say, holy shit, I have to play the drums?
Dang. Well, my dad's a drummer. And I grew up around a lot of music. Just, like he plays both the trap kit and some Eastern drums, like Indian drums, the mridanga and the tablas as well. So I always just kind of grew up with a lot of drumming in my house. And then, so I guess I was more interested in the, the trap kit, I guess you'd call it, drum set. And when I was in 5th grade, he basically asked me if I wanted to learn how to play drums. So he just taught me like a really simple beat, just like kick on 1, snare on 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, that was it. And pretty much since that day, knew that I was going to be a drummer.
So what was like the flashpoint that made you say, holy shit, I want to be a heavy drummer?
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'd have to give that over to some of my influences. The first drummer that I was like really a fan of and really wanted to emulate was Tim Alexander from Primus. So when I was in 6th grade, so about a year later, I met another kid at school who played drums. His name is Luke, and they were like, oh, you guys should be friends. Luke plays drums. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then he was into Primus, and he showed it to me, and I was just like, I just hadn't heard like that kind of drumming before, I guess. It seemed really extreme to me at the time.
Which Primus record was this?
Okay, so this was Frizzle Fry.
Yep.
And just like the sound of the drums, because I'm like really into tone as well as performance. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's not much of a difference between tone and performance. It's all kind of one thing. And just the sound of those drums was so, I don't know what it was about it, but it just really captivated me. And ever since then, I think I've wanted my drums to sound like that. It's like the kicks are like punchy and the snares cranked up really tight, and he plays with splashes and really intricate playing. And I think even still now you can see that influence there, all these 20 some odd years later.
Dude, I can totally hear it, actually. Now that you mention it, it makes complete sense.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't like hear me play and go, wow, that guy probably likes Tim Alexander. But if I said it to you, like that was my first main influence, then you would get it. And definitely like that, like I said, that was, when I heard that, I was like, okay, I'm like going to seriously do this. And that was just always my thing. And I never thought that I would make any money playing drums or anything like that. I just purely was into it because I wanted to be a drummer. And that's still my take on it,
Yeah, I mean, most people don't pick up a pair of drumsticks in order to go on the road and eat ramen noodle. And
yeah.
I want to eat a shit ton of ramen noodle. I think I'm going to play the drums so I can do that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it would be a very practical way of, if you really wanted to be forced to do nothing for a period in your life but eat ramen noodle, like you could definitely say, like, I think I'm going to be a musician, because that's a surefire way to being forced to have to do that for at least a time.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, no. Usually people pick up a pair of sticks because they hear Tim Alexander or they hear whichever drummer on a record, and they're like, God, I got to do that.
Yeah, so, definitely. And that's how I was, and all the music that I've ever loved has always been obscure. So, I mean, I remember my mom always laughs when I was probably 16 or something. She was like, she says that I straight up said to her, like, all right, Mom, just don't worry about it, because I'm never going to make any money doing this. I just do it because I love it. And that's it. So that's just sort of been my thing, I guess you will. I mean, it's a more renounced lifestyle, I guess.
Dude, it's about as pure as it gets. I mean, it's kind of like a monk-like attitude towards it. I have a lot of respect for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I like to try to tell
people that, because people, especially now with the social media and the whole popularity contest, like that stuff makes you miserable. And playing drums is what makes us happy. And that's why we did it in the first place, creating, not just drums, whatever kind of music. And it's like, I just, whenever I talk, I try to tell people that, for sure.
Yeah, that's good advice. Trying to chase view counts and likes and all that, that's like pretty much the fastest route to being miserable.
I know. It's a guaranteed route to being miserable. We know that's a fact, because there's always someone who's going to have more views than you. So it's just play, enjoy it, enjoy that art. And then you can look back and no regrets.
Yeah, dude, everything will follow if you just follow what you love. So after Animosity, was it after Animosity that you joined Animals as leaders?
Yes, pretty much. So Animosity broke up in November 2008, and then exactly 1 year later, November 2009, I was in Animals as leaders.
Right. I remember you sending me, or at least maybe you sent me the link to a video that was of you rehearsing the material on an electronic drum kit.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Do you remember that video?
Yeah, I remember sending you, just because it had been like, I hadn't been on tour in like a year, so I was just kind of like, hey, Chris, just wanted to check in. I'm like joining this band. Wanted to make sure I'm like still endorsed or whatever. And you were like, yeah, of course, man. It's cool.
Yeah, I saw you actually. The first show I saw you do with Animals was at a NAMM show in one of the rooms upstairs.
At the Mackey.
Yep, that was it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the music's pretty demanding, of course, with Animals. Was it, at that point in time, was it the most musically challenging situation that you had experienced?
Yeah, I mean, it was way beyond what I was capable of, but I just straight up lied and said I could do it, and then had to force myself to learn how to do it. I had never even played like an odd time beat before, but
Wow.
I did know that I would be able to get it. I wasn't able to do it at the time of saying, hey, because I was friends with Tosin. Animosity used to play a lot of shows with his old band Reflux. So we became friends, we had kind of similar interests and stuff, and we had talked on and off throughout the years, and then he was going to do Animals a time before that, like right after Animosity ended, or it might have been a little bit before that. I can't exactly remember. And then he decided to put that on hold and go on tour with Born of Osiris. I don't know if you remember that at all, but
I remember that he had been with them for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. So he put Animals on, like, I was kind of at that point slated to go do it then. And then he was like, you know what? I think I'm going to like put this on hold and kind of go, get my feet back in the business touring with Born of Osiris. That could be good for me. And like, I was sort of bummed. I was like, all right, well, shit. I was like really looking forward to doing it. I was like trying to talk him out of it, to be honest with you. And then, because I was like, dude, you just go do like, trust me, when you go do this thing, like, people are going to freak the heck out, which is obviously true. Because we had that Animals album, like, when I was still in Animosity. Like, it didn't come out, I think, for a year before it was done. So I had already had it and was listening to it, and I was like, dude, this is like, I remember talking to him and being like, dude, I can't believe I know you. Like, this is insane. And then, sure enough, a year or whatever later, he decided to do it, and I was like, all right, man, I'm the drummer. Like, I straight up paid for it. I shipped my drums out and bought my own plane ticket, like, because, he was just getting it up off the ground, no money. And, yeah, it was cool.
So you joined Animals, and I remember watching you guys on a Summer Slaughter tour. You guys were the openers. It seemed like a situation you fit pretty well in. So why did you leave Animals?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think at that time in my life, I was probably maybe around 25, and I'd been with the exception of that 1 year that I was telling you about, off from Animosity to Animals, and even in that time, I was working on my solo thing, which was called Flesh Rot. It's like a death metal solo thing with the vocalist of Job for a Cowboy, Johnny. So I'd been doing that the whole time and recording bands, and then I went straight into Animals, and then that was like nonstop tour as soon as we started. And I honestly just wanted a different pace of life for a while, to be 100% real with you. Like, it was going really well, but I was kind of just like, this is great, but for me, I want to take some time to focus on not being on tour, focus on production. Like, I was getting way into electronic music production, and just kind of just not be in a band for a while, Like, I'd been in bands that were touring for about 10 years at that point. And I still see it to this day. Like, I see people who are in their band that they've been in for a super long time, and because sometimes people will open up to me because I've done that. I've quit a really big band, and they'll kind of be like, man, I'm thinking about, I'm having a hard time or whatever. I'm not going to name names, but I can just tell, like, they just need a break. They just need like a year or 2 years even off of that grind. And that's really what I felt like I needed at the time. And obviously I can't just say, hey, I'm going to take 2 years off and you guys can figure it out. So they sort of moved forward with Matt, and honestly, it's a great fit. And I don't regret it for a second. I love those guys, and I love the way my life went.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I think when it was interesting, I had a little bit of an inside view to it all because I knew you were a good fit in that band, and then when Matt joined the band, you were still living with the band in L.A., and then was he living with you guys or just coming over to that house to rehearse with them?
No, he wasn't living there, but he lived in L.A., so yeah. I mean, I lived there for a little while, and then he moved. He was in L.A. doing his thing. He's trying to be a professional drummer, got into Animals. They started rehearsing, and then shortly after that, I moved out.
But there was a moment where it overlapped where you were living there and they were rehearsing at the house, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I gotta say though, man, like, I think it's a real testimonial to you just being the cool dude that I was talking about. The fact that you just, I mean, I guess maybe like, who knows, maybe deep down it kind of like irritated you a little bit, but you probably never showed it. You probably just hung in there and were a team player, and like, I don't know. I think that like that takes some real nuts. Like, I think that was pretty cool.
I mean, yeah, yes, for sure, but it wasn't. It's not like the type of thing where I was like getting jealous or whatever. It's like I knew what my decision was. I knew what it meant. I knew it meant this band's going to go on without me. I knew it meant that this guy is going to be on the cover of Modern Drummer, and it's not going to be me. I realized all that stuff, and at that point in my life, I was, and till this day, I'm okay with that. Like I said earlier, right off the bat, I don't do it to be in a popularity contest or to try to make a bunch of money. I do this stuff because I love it, and that's how I gauge the success of my life.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I really admire that. Well, you had mentioned that you were getting into electronics, so immediately, it seems like kind of immediately after Animals, you pursued this deep dive into electronics that combined acoustic drums with electronic drums. What was the idea behind that path, and what did you take away from your experience with it?
Yeah, so it was, I had been listening to a lot of electronic music at the time. It was really big then. It was like 2010. And I'm a drummer, obviously, so I started to sort of mix the two things together, and it became a cool project, and I just called it Navene K. So that's just my name with my last initial. And Animals was actually really cool. They took me on tour to open for them like twice. So I went on tour here and in Europe like a few years after I had left the band. And so that was basically it, and it was really, really fun. I guess what I took away from it was I got a unique perspective of going on tour alone. So that was a whole different type of thing. I mean, of course, I was around a lot of people, but it is really crazy to be on tour and to play a show, and like maybe you played a really sick show and like the crowd was really into it, and then you get backstage and it's just you. It's really interesting, man. Like I'm really glad that I have that experience. And so I kind of learned like what the dynamic is with the band and like all some things that I may have taken for granted. And then on another side, just the production level. I mean, it made me such a better like mixing engineer and producer, and just totally expanded my knowledge of all that stuff now. And since then, I've done like I produced Tommy from BT Bam's one of his solo albums because of that time I spent with the electronic stuff. I did some electronic stuff on Animals as Leaders on Joy of Motion. I mean, I record all of InTheis' stuff now. I like I said, it just really put me in a different place. I mean, and I really hit it hard for a couple of years. You know, I was like, that was like all I was doing all day.
Dude, that's super cool. I love the idea of the self-sufficiency of being on tour by yourself. So when you would go on the road, and you mentioned that Animals was cool and they took you out and had you open shows for them, who would you end up traveling with? Who would you like ride in a van with or ride a bus with?
So I rode with them on both of those tours. So I did, I think I did the Joy of Motion U.S. tour. And then, but they had a bus, and they just like let me ride along on one of the bunks. And then, same thing in Europe. So yeah, it was. So I would hang with them, but obviously at the show, I'd have a different backstage and stuff. And in Europe, there was this guy it was with Tesseract as well. And there was this dude who was kind of just like working for Tesseract, like just being a tech, and he knew how to do sound, so he started doing my sound on that tour, and that was like, he and I kind of became really close. He kind of became my like surrogate band member, and I was like, yeah, you can, because they would give me like my own, like Animals is pretty big, so they play like bigger venues, so like I'd have my own backstage a lot, and I'd be like, yeah, you can chill in here. So we became like really close on that tour.
That's awesome. You mentioned a few minutes ago talking about Flesh Rot. Were those the videos I saw where you were playing guitar and then was it Charn playing drums?
It was Alex Rudinger.
Rudinger, that's right. It was Rudy that did it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when and how did you learn to play guitar, and is it something you still do often?
Yeah. So I learned how to play guitar, I'm still learning, but I started playing about 1 year probably after I started playing drums, 1 to 2 years, just because like I know I'm not like oblivious. I realized that drums are loud, and I didn't want to like totally bug my mom like playing drums 24/7, so I was like, okay, well, I can start playing guitar. That's quiet. And then I traded a neighbor. I traded him, I still remember, a splash cymbal and a stand for like a cheap Squier Fender guitar. And I just play it all the time. And I mean, it's something I do almost every day. I wrote a lot of the music for Animosity. And then I really had the sort of, I really wanted to like prove that I could play guitar totally in full on an album, and that's sort of why I did the Flesh Rot thing. And but I mean, Alex doesn't play drums on that album, on the Flesh Rot album. He just, like, we met sort of just online, and he was like, yo, I want to play drums, do some covers or whatever, so we did that. But I play guitar all the time. I actually play guitar in InTheis now, like on all the recordings and stuff, and we have a live guitar player. And yeah, I kind of want to start putting more content out there with me playing guitar. because I do it so much, but it's always been this like private thing.
So how did you actually learn? So when you went and got that Squire Strat from your neighbor with the trade, like, and you brought it back home, how did you teach yourself how to play?
At first I would probably just noodle around. Everybody, like your friends, you probably have a friend who can play some guitar, like here's how you do a power chord. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then, just kind of the same way I learned how to play drums. I just try to emulate people that I'm listening to. So at the time I was listening to probably a lot of metal, and I just started learning how to play metal songs, going online and looking up the tabs. And then that just immediately turned into me writing my own riffs and coming up with my own stuff. So that's what I did.
That's super cool. Now, you've always struck me as being really relaxed and confident about all of your endeavors. Is that the way that you're hardwired, or is it a learned trait that you sort of tempered through effort and discipline?
Yeah, I'd probably say it's the latter, to be honest with you.
So it's something you have to work at daily? It's like a daily discipline?
I'd say so, yeah. I'm a very, by nature, I'm like a super neurotic person. So, yeah, just, I'm still working on it, man. Trying to be more relaxed. Of course, about music and, like, that sort of stuff, I've always been really relaxed. But in my day-to-day life, I'm a little more hyper, so always trying to calm that down. But as far as, like with leaving animals, that whole thing, that's just sort of how I am. I didn't have to discipline myself into not being jealous or anything like that. But of course there's some moments, but for the most part, I think I am calm about stuff like that.
So when you say neurotic, do you mean like you have to check the stove 3 times before you walk out of the house to make sure that it's off?
Just sort of like high strung, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I really hate saying that, and it doesn't really come out that much, but I'm saying naturally I have the tendency to be like that. So since I know that, I'm able to combat that, and just when I get a frustrated feeling, most of the time I can just be like, hey, that's just your nerves, you can let that go, don't respond to that. It's like,
Dude.
It's like your inner little kid, there's a little kid in there, and he's always crying, and you have to be his dad, I guess.
Yeah, no, dude, I get it. From one sort of high-strung person to the next, I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Now, tell me about your band, InTheis, as far as what your ultimate goal is for the band. At this point, it's you and your fiance, Cheney.
That's
right. And you guys just hire whomever you need to hire for a tour to do it. And you can play the music and record it, and she can do the vocals and record it. And so you're pretty self-sufficient in that respect. But what's your goal for the band? Is it a project that has no ultimate timetable? It's just, kind of ride it out until you're satisfied and on to the next thing? Or how do you see it?
I see it, honestly, when we started the band, my late 20s, getting way up there. And I kind of wanted to just make a project that I could do forever and not have to have the pressure of it has to be this one thing, otherwise there's not a band. And that's honestly how I see a lot of bands operate. It's like, oh, if we don't go on tour for 6 months, then there basically is no band. And I really wanted InTheis to just be like the home base for me and Cheney. We can make metal, and we can do it forever. And if we want to take a couple of years off, we can take a couple of years off. If we want to go full time and do it all the time, we can do that too. So that's really the point of it. But our goals now, like mid to long goal, it's like, yeah, we want to go on more tours. We want to have the band be a totally self-sufficient thing. Maybe it, can cover some of our bills and stuff, and that's really what it does, and that's what we want it to do.
Well, I mentioned that Cheney is your fiance. What would you think, like if you had to answer for her, what do you think she would say is the hardest thing about having to tour with you?
I'd say probably the hardest thing about her having to tour with me. I'd say probably...
No, not the hardest thing about her. What's the hardest thing for her about having to tour with you? Like, what sucks about you?
Yeah, where do I start? I'd say... I'd say if I ever, on tour, everything is basically amplified on tour. So if you're... Whatever you are at home, you're going to be that times 10 on tour because you're operating in like a totally different world, right? So if you have a little bit of a temper when you go on tour, you're going to have a really bad temper. If you like to drink a little bit at home when you go on tour, you're going to drink a ton on tour, right? So I'd say it's that high-strung behavior would probably be the worst thing for her to have to deal with. I mean, if we're like late to a show, and I'm like, God damn it, everybody, yell. Maybe I'll like lose my cool and we'll get into like a little fight or something like that. That would probably be the worst thing, to be honest with you.
So like when you guys argue on the road, which, I mean, it's inevitable, your bandmates.
Yeah, and that's sort of why I'm prefacing it. It's like if you go on, that was something I wanted to say. Like you're going to get into little arguments with your band members. And then it just so happens that I'm getting into an argument with my fiance and a band member at the same time. So it's a whole different level,
That's got to be interesting for your tour mates, the guys you've hired to go on the road with you. That's got to be like a bit of an odd field full of landmines to navigate. So maybe they have decided they tend to agree with whatever stance that your bandmate and fiance Cheney has taken, or maybe they tend to agree with the stance you've taken, and then they have to navigate not only the fact that you guys are fiancés, but that you're also bandmates. And holy shit, how do they do that?
Yeah. So I mean, I've definitely thought about that, and if Cheney wasn't such the person that she is, it would be, I feel like it would be really hard. But she's like, she grew up going to metal shows. She's been a metal vocalist, as long as probably since the time that I started playing drums. I'm a little older than her, but at that point in her life, she knew that's what she wanted to do. So, I mean, she's totally cool, and she's like, one of the guys, like, everybody on tour really gets along with her. So, and we don't bicker and all that kind of stuff on tour. Like, this is really rare stuff that I'm talking about. For the most part, like on tour, it's like we're almost more of bandmates. And it's like we don't really get a whole lot of time to just do couple stuff. You're always around other people. So I honestly think that And it was my hope that for the most part, they just sort of view us as band members. Obviously, there'll be little times here and there when it's a little different. But in past experiences, I think that we've made it so that people feel like if, let's say, there is a little tiff or argument, they feel comfortable enough to go on whoever's side they need to speak up for, just whoever they think's in the right, if you will. There's not like a alliance type thing going on.
Yeah, no, totally. Okay, I could see that. Is it cool when you come off of a tour? Maybe you've been on a long tour and then you come home with Cheney. Is it comfortable? Like, not comfortable. Is it comforting to come home with her?
Yeah.
Has there ever been moments where the two of you are like, okay, you're going to go in that room and I'm going to go in this room and I'll see you after a while?
Like I said, it's honestly not like that. Like when we're home, I'm just like, we're both so happy to just have some time to ourselves that it's like a whole different thing. We're like, oh, we can just be a couple. Like, let's go to dinner and, watch the sunset or just do stuff that you wouldn't get to do when you're on tour. Because when you're on tour with your significant other, it's like there is this kind of constant frustration. It's like, I wish that we could just be like alone for a couple days, or just maybe we're in, and you get little glimpses of that here and there, like, hey, we're going to go for a walk and do this, but you do sort of long for that. So I don't ever feel like, hey, we need a couple days apart after tour. Not at all. Like I'm
that's
I'm
awesome.
more excited to just be like, hey, we can go just do our thing and not have to talk about the band and not have to think about the band.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, you recorded the most recent Whitechapel album with Mark Lewis producing, and Mark actually has been a guest on the podcast before, so anybody listening, if you want to hear a cool perspective from the other side of things, you should search for the Mark Lewis Meinl Radio podcast. It's pretty interesting. Now, as far as the Whitechapel album goes, do you do many sessions like that, and are you ever asked by bands to either fill in for their drummer, like at the drum chair on tour, or actually even join the band?
Yeah, I get hit up a good amount. I mean, I'm not really looking to join like a full-time touring band. That's not where I'm at, because I'm doing InTheis and I like my life at home as well. But anytime I can do a session thing, I'm all over it. So when InTheis did a tour with Whitechapel and a couple years ago, and I kind of, made friends with them. They knew that I was a super chill dude, and then they liked my drumming. So I remember I got a call, like I saw my phone, Ben called me, and I just knew, like, I knew when I answered the phone they were going to ask me to play drums on the album. And I answered the phone, and he was like, hey, man, we're writing an album here. You want to play drums on it? And I was just like, yep, for sure. Yes, please. And, then I got to fly out there, and I got to hang out with Mark for, like, I think it was 10 days or something like that. And, it was so fun. That was, like, one of the funnest things I've ever done. And so, yeah, I love doing stuff like that. I recently did, like, a couple songs on the new Machine Head album. That was a pretty good time. I'm doing another pretty big metal session, but I can't say who it is just yet.
Now, the Machine Head thing, did that come about from you being a Bay Area guy and just knowing Rob Flynn, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I actually don't know him at all. It was, they record with a guy named Zach Oren, and he's a guy who we met, like, in Animosity. We met him, like, back in the day. I mean, I was, like, 16, so let's see, that's, like, 14 years ago almost. And he basically is like the equivalent of Animosity, but recording engineer, right? So he started real young. He was at his mom's house, and Leo, the singer of Animosity, was like, hey, I met this dude, he records, like, he'll record us. And so we drove to his house. We recorded, like, our first demo in his mom's living room. And then we recorded the first couple albums with him. And he went on to record a bunch of Bay Area bands like All Shall Perish and Light This City and all kinds of metal from out here. But now he sort of works with Machine Head, like, a lot. Like, he produces them, and he's, like, in the studio with them a lot. They have a practice space, and they work out of this big studio in Oakland, which is like an hour and a half from me. So I think just Zach is, like, around Rob a lot, and so we've done a bunch of random, like, session work together, sample libraries, and he recorded InTheis, and anyway, we've been friends for a long time, so he'd show Rob, my drumming and stuff, and I guess they needed a drummer for a couple songs, and Zach was like, hey, man, Machine Head wants you to come out and play a couple songs, are you free tomorrow? And, like, it just so happened that I had the day free, and I was like, I'm there, man, and went ahead and did it. It was a good time.
That's cool. Now, did you bring your own drum kit in, or did you have to play something they had in the studio for you?
I think I used they had something in there, and then I did bring my cymbals, though. Don't worry.
It's cool. I'm not checking. Dude, I know how it works, man. I mean, there's plenty of records that have had Zildjian artists and they've ended up playing Meinl, Paiste, Sabian, whatever, and vice versa. Like, I know how it works. It's behind studio walls. As long as you don't have a magazine showing up, taking pictures and printing it, or people like filming it and then putting videos of it on YouTube, it's totally cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, no. But I actually did bring some stuff, obviously. But no, I was like, yeah, I'll just use your drums. I really just didn't want to go through the... Or maybe I did. I actually can't remember. I'm pretty sure I used their drums, but I went and got my cymbals. And I grabbed like my pedal and stuff.
So when you showed up, was Rob at the session?
Yeah, he was there. He hung out the whole time. He's really cool, man. He's an awesome guy. I was happy to hang out with him. So yeah, I did one song, and that was the first time, and then I think like a month later, they hit me up again, like, hey, do you want to come back? And sure enough, I went back. It was great. I mean, dude, if I could do that like every day, I would just love that. Like, just go to the studio, play drums on random metal. And the Whitechapel thing, man, that was so fun. You know, I know that you got to come by for a second and talk to Mark and stuff, and
yeah,
just like meeting
that's where
Mark.
I met
Mark.
Mark.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he's just like really funny and fun to hang out with. And then I became a lot better friends with all those Whitechapel guys, and that album was also like really well received. So I'm just happy to be a part of it, man. It's like the whole reason why I started playing drums.
Well, here's a question that just came to my mind, and I thought of it because I thought that maybe listeners out there might actually want some insight as to how this works. So let's say that you get a call from Machine Head and they want you to come out and record a song the next day. At what point and with whom do you discuss compensation, and how does that go down? Is it a comfortable conversation? Is it sometimes uncomfortable?
I think it's sort of... yeah, I mean, it's obviously for me, I like hate asking for money, but I'm pretty good about it. I just like tear the Band-Aid off, and I always just say like, yeah, how much are you gonna pay me? Not like in a jerk way, but just like, but for bigger bands like that, they'll just tell you how much they want to give you straight off the bat. So I mean, it was like, hey, we want you to play this song. Here's what we can give you. Is that cool? And then I'd like, yep. And the same for Whitechapel. So, I mean, most of the time, people are just going to say it out front. But, I mean, hey, like, if we lived in a world where there was no money and it was just like a bartering thing, that would be great. But we don't live in that world. So I have to say, hey, give me some money to do this, and I'll do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, that's the way it works. But have you ever been insulted by somebody's offer, what they put out there that they could pay you?
Sort of. Not like I wasn't insulted, but like sometimes like there's been, I'm not going to name names, but there's been bands who are like overtly technical. And it's just so for me to like learn it all would be like, I mean, it would take me probably like 2 weeks or, 3 weeks. And then, yeah, they're like, we'll pay you, I don't know, something crazy like $1,000 or something. And it's like, dude, that's 3 weeks of work. I can't do that. So, yeah, I don't get offended, but I just can't do it if that's the case.
So when you get a band that's overtly technical and they want you to learn 3 weeks worth of stuff for $1,000, when you come back and tell them like, I can't do that, man, and you explain why, do they sort of see the light and then they up the ante a bit, or do they offer more, or do they just kind of go, all right, well, never mind? I mean, how's that worked?
I mean, I'm pretty like realistic, so I mean, most of the time I'll just be like, it's just not in the cards for me to do this. Not because of the money though. Like if it was something that I really wanted to do, I'd just make it happen. Like for instance, for like the Whitechapel thing, it's like I just really wanted to do it. So as long as they didn't insult me with the amount of money they wanted to pay me, I was going to do it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so I just have to weigh all that stuff out in my mind. Like sometimes with the really technical metal, it's like I love listening to it, I like making it, but learning someone else's version of it, I mean, I just don't really want to do that. You know, like,
yeah,
I don't like doing things strictly for money. Let's put it that way. And if I am going to do something strictly for money, I don't really want it to be involving music.
Yeah. What do you love most about having a career in music, and what is it that you tend to be not so crazy about, that you just sort of like? What's the aspect of it that you just sort of have to put up with?
I mean, honestly, for me, I kind of sound like a broken record, but I'm just not into like promoting myself as like a commodity. You know, that whole thing just is not. I'm not knocking anybody who is into that and who does a good job at that. Like, that's just not my passion. You know, I'm just not that type of person, and it's to my detriment. You know, it's hindered me for sure as being as like popular or whatever that I could be, because I just don't really love doing that kind of stuff. So that would be the thing about it that I really don't like. I don't like having to promote. I don't like having to, you know, worry about the monetary side. That stuff all sucks. I am just really into doing the work, and honestly, everything else about it is what I love about it. I love working on music. I like finishing projects and the feeling you get when you work on someone else's album or your own. Putting new music on, like when you release new music, it's one of the coolest feelings when you write something awesome and you're jumping up and down in your bedroom. That's like, honestly, that's the high point for me. Going on tour and playing shows is amazing. I've met like literally everyone that's close to me in my life I've met through music. So Cheney, I met her at a show. All of my close friends I've met through music. I mean, it's my whole life. Like I wouldn't change a thing. It's it's really cool, and that's why I do it.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Like, if people said, you know, what's coming out? What's the next thing we can expect from Navene? What would that be?
So InTheis has got a bunch of new material. So we're trying to, we have like a unique problem in that we make material too fast for it to come out. So we're honestly just trying to decide like which demos we want to work on and sort of turn into an album. So we're doing that right now. Me and Cheney have a podcast. It's called Copper Crab. Like her last name is Crab. My last name is Koperweis. So that's Copper Crab. And we've been doing that a lot, actually. Since the whole like quarantine thing, a lot of people have been home, so we've been like getting a ton of guests just like over Zoom, and it's been pretty cool. So we are doing that. It's a, just kind of a podcast about what it's like to be in a touring band and all that stuff, and hear from behind the curtain, if you will. But pretty much just that, really. That and just making wacky Instagram videos on drums. That's another thing I like to do.
And you mentioned also that your obsession recently has been refurbing, like doing this van.
Oh, man. I love the van. Yeah, so we have a 15-passenger Ford. So I tore out all the seats and all the carpet and all the trim and all the plastic stuff, and I put down like insulation, a wood floor. I put in like this wood bench. There's going to be a bed in there. There's insulation and wood panels on the walls, and I don't know if you saw it, but I set up a little cocktail drum set inside the van and made a video playing drums inside of it yesterday.
Dude,
the van's not the van's not totally done, but I was like, wow, I think I could fit a little drum kit in here. And of course the seat has to be really low, but I can play drums in my van. It's like so cool. I was like just getting such a kick out of it.
That's pretty awesome. Where did you learn to do all this? Is it just by watching YouTube videos?
That and I mean I build stuff like I work part-time, I guess you could call it, as a drapery installer. So it's like I have a lot of tools and miscellaneous hardware, and I've always liked to build stuff my whole life. Like me and my brother would always take everything apart and try to put it back together, and you know, that kind of a thing. And my dad's like that too, handy. So yeah, I mean I've been seeing all these vans online, just like van life hashtag, and I was like, man, that is super cool. I'm going to do that. And then I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, though, to be honest with you, Chris. Like, I was kind of, I had the idea to do it, and I started it, and when I was like, there's been moments where I'm like, damn, I'm like way in over my head, you know, because I've never done like woodwork or like any of this kind of stuff. So, but then you kind of get over the hump, and then now I have like just a little bit left to do and some finishing touches. And it's going to be awesome. I mean, I can't wait. And it's going to be great to tour in, too. So.
Yeah, no, I imagine it would be somewhat modular on the inside because you can't realistically take other dudes out and go on tour and have a drum kit set up in the back.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, it differs from a lot of, like, if you're in the van building kind of like community, mine definitely differs in that it is a little bit more modular because people will put like permanent fixtures, like say they have a little bunk bed, they'll build like permanent cabinets and stuff underneath the bed. Well, I need to put, you know, people under there, so I can't build a lot of permanent stuff. So I want it to function as like a cool camper for me and Cheney when we're home, and then easily take that stuff out and put in beds for people to sleep. And like I made a bench it'll be like a cool little sofa, but it's 6 feet long, so someone could sleep on that as well. So it has
that's cool.
dual purpose. And then now apparently, I didn't even think of it till yesterday. I was like, I think I could play drums in here. So now it's a little mobile drum studio.
The insulation is for climate control?
Yeah, so I kind of just did it because that's like what other people have done, and you know, it gets super cold. What is the advantage that I have is like I've already lived in the van just stock with nothing, so like I know what it's like out there. So any insulation is going to be better than what we had before. But yeah, so when we're like on tour in the winter, we'll be able to like put a little heater on and it'll get nice and toasty in there. So that'll be really awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, dude, final question for you, man. Let our listeners know where they can go to check out InTheis and support the band.
Yeah, so we got an Instagram that's InTheis Official, and then InTheis on Facebook. I mean, pretty much if you just punch InTheis into Google, you'll get all of our stuff. That's ENTHEOS. And we just released a new song. It's on Spotify and all the streaming services, plus Bandcamp and YouTube. It's called Remember You Are Dust. It's our first song released as like just me and Cheney being the entire band. So it's pretty cool. Like I played guitar on it. It's the first song we released where I'm playing guitar. So we're going to keep doing that stuff. And yeah, I mean, we had 2 tours booked this summer. We were going to go on tour in U.S. and Canada, but obviously that isn't happening. So that's where you can find us now, on the interwebs.
Right on. Dude, Navene, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to chat and fill everybody in, tell everybody about yourself, and put up with my ridiculous line of questioning. I really appreciate it, man.
Dude, I'm always honored, man. Anything you ever ask me to do, I'm always honored. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Meinl Radio. If you liked this episode, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We would appreciate it very much. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.